The once humble hamburger is the centre of it all. The burger barons are about to spend over £40 million this year on getting you and your families into what they call fast food centres.
3 pieces of batter-dipped chicken, fried crisp and golden, fluffy whipped potatoes, tender sweet vegetables, and apple cake cobbler for dessert.
Before McDonald's, Burger King, and endless fast food chains covered every corner, America once had streets filled with the smell of food, with cheap dishes that could warm an entire generation. But then, it all disappeared. Have you ever wondered which foods once kept whole cities alive, became the memories of millions of people, but today you will never taste again? In this video, join me as we travel back in time to explore 25 street foods that once captured the heart of America from the 1920s to the 1970s, but now live on only in memory. 25. Philadelphia pepper pot, a spicy soup that chased away the cold. Some foods, when mentioned, can bring an entire city back to life in memory. For Philadelphia, that was pepper pot, a steaming hot soup made from tripe simmered until tender. Each piece of meat soaking in the sharp heat of black pepper, blended with hearty potatoes, carrots, celery, and sprigs of fresh herbs. Just lifting the lid of the pot sent a spicy steam straight into your nose, waking up your taste buds in the biting cold. Back then, pepper pot was everywhere. In bustling markets like Reading Terminal, on the cobblestone streets, and outside factory gates, where street vendors waited for workers to finish their shifts. The cry of "Pepper pot, hot!" rang through the winter air, tied forever to the memories of generations. Even more important, pepper pot was cheap enough for anyone to buy. Just 2 to 4 cents a bowl, the same as a loaf of bread or the cheapest cup of coffee. For immigrant laborers from Germany, England, or the Caribbean, and for American workers alike, this affordable soup wasn't just a meal, it was fuel to keep going through harsh winters. From poor widows to busy businessmen, everyone once leaned over a cast iron pot, slurping down that thick, peppery broth that burned the tongue but warmed the soul. But after World War II, stricter city sanitation rules wiped out the street soup vendors, and pepper pot slowly disappeared from markets and sidewalks. By the 1950s and 60s, when burgers, hot dogs, and pizza took over, younger generations grew up never knowing the taste of this fiery tripe soup. Campbell's tried to keep it alive in cans, but by 2010, sales were too low, and the company discontinued it. From that moment, pepper pot vanished completely from mainstream American life. You can still cook it at home or find a few home-style recreations, but nothing can bring back the old atmosphere. Nothing can compare to the steam rising from a street pot on a freezing day, with the call of pepper pot, hot, beating like the heart of the city. Because this soup was never just food, it was the memory of a generation. And once it was gone, Americans knew there was no way to ever taste the exact flavor of the past again. 24. Chili Queens, Texas's 60-year red stew tradition, wiped away if Philadelphia once had pepper pot as its soul of the street. Then in South Texas, people were proud of a nighttime tradition that couldn't be mistaken for anything else: the steaming pots of chili from the Chili Queens of San Antonio. From about 1870 to the early 1930s, just step into Military Plaza, or Alamo Plaza, at dusk, and you'd see the square glowing with oil lamps, the sting of wood smoke mixing with the sound of corrido music, and the aroma of red chili, garlic, and simmering beef filling the air. Don't be mistaken. The chili from the Chili Queens was nothing like the canned chili you buy in supermarkets today. It was a pot of finely chopped beef or venison, slow cooked in a black cast iron kettle, set over coals. The meat soaked in a thick red sauce of ground, dried Mexican chilies, garlic, cumin, wild oregano, and a touch of beef fat, spicy, smoky, rich, and heavy in the Texas night air. Served in a clay bowl, sprinkled with raw onions, and eaten with a hot tortilla, it made diners tear up, sniffle, and still scrape the bowl clean. A bowl cost only a few cents, cheap but filling, enough to feed workers, coach drivers, soldiers, and even traveling merchants. The miracle was that everyone sat at the same outdoor tables. No walls, no class divisions. It was truly a table without walls, humble yet generous. Sadly, this 60-year tradition couldn't survive the times. From 1936 to 1937, San Antonio officials began enforcing stricter health codes, declaring outdoor stands unsafe. By the early 1940s, the Chili Queens were forced to close, ending a golden era. Today, chili is still served in restaurants and food trucks, but the community soul is gone. No more laughter echoing across the plazas. No more rich sitting next to poor, slurping the same steaming bowl. The people of San Antonio still remember the Chili Queens. They remember a city once breathing through the smoke of open pots and the fire of red chili, now gone forever. 23. Oyster carts, the peacemaker. Gift for wives. Can you believe that once upon a time, New York wasn't defined by hot dogs or pizza, but by 1-cent oysters? From the 1700s through the early 1900s, oyster carts lined the Hudson River and Manhattan docks, where vendors shucked shells on the spot, sprinkled a little salt and lemon, and handed them straight to customers. Oysters were so abundant, they fed the entire city, a humble food instead of the luxury they are today. The most famous dish was the oyster loaf, also called the peacemaker, a long loaf of bread stuffed with golden fried oysters, served hot. After long nights of drinking, New York men often brought one home as a peace offering to their wives, giving the sandwich its playful nickname. Laborers loved slurping down fresh oysters right on the sidewalk, while businessmen ordered dozens of oyster loaves to share with friends on late-night ferry rides. Everyone carried their own memory of the salty tang of the sea and the rhythmic clink of shucking knives under flickering gaslights by the harbor. But disaster struck in the early 20th century. The Hudson River and nearby bays became heavily polluted. In 1927, New York's last oyster bed was officially closed. From then on, the culture of oyster carts disappeared, replaced by oysters as a luxury food in high-end restaurants. Today, you can still find oysters in Manhattan's upscale bars, but gone are the crowds of workers around the carts. Gone is the sound of knives cracking shells in the night. Older New Yorkers still mourn. They know this city once breathed with the salt of the river, once lived on humble 1-cent oysters, a memory never to return. 22. Popcorn wagon, a roaring festival on wheels. There was a time when popcorn wasn't just a movie theater snack, but the star of America's streets. In the early 1900s, at fairs and outside Nickelodeons, you'd find bright red and gold glass wagons. Inside them, the clattering Tosti-Rosti machines, spinning nonstop. These popcorn wagons were nothing like today's plain concession stands. They ran on steam or coal, later electricity, built by C. Creeders and Company, one of America's earliest food equipment makers. Each wagon looked like a tiny steamboat, with domes, twinkling lights, and creaky wooden wheels. And the smell. Melted butter, roasting peanuts, and the smoky pop of corn filled every corner, making passers-by stop in their tracks. For just a few pennies, kids pooled change, young couples bought a bag to share, and grown-ups grabbed some before a show. For many Americans, this was their first memory of the excitement of a fair or an evening at the movies. But once theaters installed large popcorn machines indoors, the wagons were pushed off the sidewalks. By mid-century, those glowing wagons had almost completely vanished, replaced by indoor counters, convenient but soulless. Even today, popcorn is still a symbol of American cinema, but now it's just the hollow crackle of kernels inside a soulless steel machine. Gone are the cheerful pop-pop sounds echoing on dark street corners. Gone are the glowing red and gold wagons that once rolled like traveling carnivals. For those who remember, a popcorn wagon was never just about the snack. It carried childhood itself, the memory of a bustling yet simple America that has long since slipped away. 21. Molasses popcorn balls, sticky Halloween treats of childhood. Do you remember the feeling of a little hand trembling as it unwrapped a warm wax paper packet to reveal a popcorn ball coated in molasses, smoky and sweet? For generations of Americans in the 1930s through the 1950s, that was the taste of Halloween. Simple, familiar, and full of love. Molasses popcorn balls were never fancy. Just popcorn mixed with boiled molasses, rolled into neat round balls. But their simplicity was pure joy. Sticky hands, sugary teeth, giggling kids bumping shoulders, mouths smeared with syrup, but eyes shining. They didn't come from stores. They came from moms and neighbors, sitting by the stove, patiently dipping spoons into bubbling molasses, shaping each ball and wrapping it in wax paper. They weren't just candy. They were homemade gifts, warm family moments passed hand to hand, sweeter than any factory-made chocolate or peppermint. By the late 1960s, a shadow crept over Halloween. Rumors spread of people hiding pins or blades in homemade candy. Most were only urban legends, but the fear crept into every household. Parents no longer trusted homemade treats, and kids were only allowed to accept factory-wrapped candy. From then on, molasses popcorn balls, once the symbol of Halloween, quietly disappeared from trick-or-treat bags. Today, Halloween overflows with Hershey's, M&M's, Reese's, and more, colorful and flashy. But gone is the ritual of sharing candy around the fire. Gone is the sight of children huddled together, biting into sticky popcorn balls and laughing out loud. For older Americans, the memory remains. A Halloween less flashy, less noisy, but sweeter and warmer than anything today. 20. Hot potatoes, warm comfort wrapped in newspaper. In the winters of the early 20th century, when winds cut down Broadway in New York or through the old streets of Boston, people were used to hearing the cry, "Get your hot potatoes!" Mickey's Hot. Right outside the Bowery Theater by the Staten Island Ferry, or in the markets of the Lower East Side, the familiar sight was a vendor standing by a glowing coal barrel piled high with plump potatoes. The potatoes were slow roasted on damp coals, skins charred and smoky, earthy scent drifting through the alleys. Vendors wrapped them in old newspaper and handed them to shivering customers. Just holding one warmed your hands through wool gloves, like carrying a small fire. Bite in, and the crisp skin cracked, giving way to fluffy white flesh, sweet and fragrant. A humble meal, only a few cents, but enough to fill dock workers, school children, or theater goers heading home. From the late 19th century through the Great Depression, hot roasted potatoes were a winter staple across the East Coast, especially in New York, Boston, and Philadelphia, cities where freezing nights made the warmth of a newspaper-wrapped potato even more precious. But strict street vending laws and the rise of fixed restaurants pushed potato carts off the sidewalks. Baked potatoes are still around, whether from the microwave or a fast food counter, but the old feeling is gone. No more street cries drifting under the lamplight. No more smoky scent of damp coal carried on the winter wind. No more New Yorkers clutching a hot potato on the ferry ride back to Staten Island. Only a handful of black and white photographs remain as witnesses, reminding us that there was once a time when a simple potato could warm the heart of an entire city. 19. Pickle and Canish carts, the tangy bite of immigrant memory. In the early 1900s, the Lower East Side wasn't just crowded streets. It was the kingdom of wooden pickle barrels. Plump green cucumbers floating in golden brine, each lid lifted, releasing a sour aroma strong enough to soak the entire block. For Jewish immigrants, it wasn't just food. It was the taste of home, carrying memories of Eastern Europe. Beside the pickle barrels were carts selling niches, golden pastries stuffed with mashed potato or hot cabbage, cheap and filling. Kids snatched steaming pieces, adults crunched on briny pickles, and together they created the rhythm of Pickle Alley. A pickle for a few cents, a knish for the price of bread. Simple but essential for a long workday. When Mayor LaGuardia shut down pushcarts in 1940, pickles and niches didn't vanish completely, but the feeling did. The act of scooping a pickle from the barrel on the sidewalk, brine dripping, biting into it with laughter, and bargaining banter, that belonged to the past forever. 18. American chestnuts, the Christmas scent that never came back. If Halloween was tied to popcorn balls, then Old American Christmas was tied to roasted chestnuts. They weren't just a snack, they were a symbol of winter. The Native American chestnut, big and round with shiny brown shells, cracked open over the coals to reveal golden, buttery flesh. The heat from a paper bag warmed cold hands, while the nutty aroma drifted down every street. A small bag cost just a few cents, affordable for all. Kids squealed when their parents handed them one. Couples shared chestnuts under Christmas lights. For many Americans, chestnuts weren't just food. They were the smell of winter, the memory of nights that were freezing cold, yet full of warmth. But then disaster struck. In the early 20th century, a fungal blight nearly wiped out the American chestnut tree. Within just a few decades, the nut that carried community memories disappeared from city streets. Imported European chestnuts arrived, but they never tasted the same. Today, you might still spot roasted chestnut vendors on a few New York corners, but the heady aroma that once wrapped scarves and made the city tremble with warmth exists only in memory. And every winter, that memory leaves people aching for a flavor that will never return. 17. Egg cream and malted milk, the legendary soda fountain. Picture this: a drink with no eggs, no cream, yet called an egg cream, and it once had all of New York hooked. What was so special about it that teens from the 1920s through the 1950s would crowd around a drugstore soda fountain just to order a glass? An egg cream was the surprising mix of fizzy seltzer, cold milk, and Fox's You Bet chocolate syrup, stirred right there with a long spoon until a white froth rose like the head of a beer. Next to it was the malted milk, regular milk blended with malt powder, smooth and rich. Together, they were the stars of the soda fountain, the symbols of American youth in its golden age. A glass cost just a few cents, but it was enough to turn a teen date into a memory that lasted forever. But when cities spread to the suburbs, when bottled drinks and big chains like Coca-Cola and Dairy Queen took over, the soda fountain slowly disappeared. By the 1960s and 70s, egg creams and malted milks survived only in a few old shops in Brooklyn. Today, you might still find a real egg cream at a handful of family-run spots. But the squeak of the soda spout and the sound of teenagers laughing in a crowded drugstore have become memories. A sweet, fizzy memory, just like the foamy white head that once gave the egg cream its soul. 16. Philly Combo, the strange hot dog that fed a city. If you had 15 cents in Philadelphia in the 1940s, what would you buy? For many dock workers, the answer was easy. They went straight for the Philly Combo, a one-of-a-kind street food. A hot dog topped with a golden fried fish cake, then finished with a layer of tangy pepper hash made of cabbage, peppers, and vinegar. Strange, maybe, but this mix fed an entire working-class city. It was a familiar sight. Between shifts at the slaughterhouse or shipyard, workers stood by a riverside stand with a hot Philly Combo in hand, eating and chatting. The smoky sausage pressed against the soft, rich fish cake with the sharp crunch of pepper hash. Together, it was cheap, filling, and gave just enough energy to push through another long shift. Over time, as eating habits changed, the combo faded into memory. Today, it survives only at Johnny's Hots and a few traditional spots, like a relic of the city's working-class era. Older Philadelphians still remember the smell of frying oil by the Delaware River, the feeling of biting into a combo and suddenly being recharged after a hard day. To them, the Philly Combo wasn't just another hot dog. It was a symbol of their city's spirit, simple, honest, and full of life, now preserved only in memory. 15. Pickled eggs, the jar on the bar. From the early 1900s through the mid-20th century, walk into any working-class American bar, and you'd almost certainly see a big glass jar of pickled eggs on the dark wooden counter. The lid fogged with vinegar. Inside were pale, glossy eggs, soaking so long the golden brine seemed to tint the whole room. A customer ordered a German-style lager and gave a nod to the bartender. In one swift move, he pulled out an egg with wooden tongs and set it on a small plate. Split in half, the yolk was soft and crumbly, tangy vinegar soaking into every bite, especially when dipped in yellow mustard or spicy red pepper. The bitterness of the beer met the sharp and salty egg in a perfect match, so addictive that for many it became a ritual with every round. The jar was more than a snack. It was a little show. Bartenders showed off their skill with quick tongs, customers cracked jokes, the whole bar lit up with chatter. But by the late 1960s, new food safety rules required refrigerated storage and jars of unrefrigerated pickled eggs on the counter were deemed unsafe. Slowly, they disappeared. Today you might spot them in a retro bar here or there, but now they're just nostalgia. People miss not only the salty bite, but also the sense of community, the clinking of glasses, the hoarse laughter, and the way one simple egg in vinegar could become a bar-room memory for an entire generation. 14. Hot tamales, the midnight call. On cold nights in the early 20th century, the streets of Los Angeles, Texas towns, and even the Mississippi Delta didn't glow with neon lights the way they do now, but they warmed up with a call echoing through the night. Hot tamales! Hot tamales! The men who sold them were lovingly called the tamale men. From a wooden cart, a steaming pot sent white clouds into the air. The spicy scent of chilies mixed with the warmth of corn masa. Each tamale was wrapped in a dry corn husk, inside stuffed with beef or pork, spiced until fiery hot. Peel back the husk, and the steam hit your hand with instant heat. A bundle of tamales cost only a few cents, enough to fill the belly of a tired worker, a wanderer without a bed, or a young couple sharing in the dim glow of a quiet street. From the late 19th century through World War II, tamale carts were more than food. They were the warmth of poor neighborhoods, proof of the blending of Mexican and American cultures. Older people would later say they could still remember clutching the hot paper bag, feeling the warmth thaw their frozen hands, and hearing the long cry of hot tamales as a familiar song of the night. But with urban growth and stricter laws against street vending, the tamale men slowly disappeared. Today, tamales remain in festivals or traditional shops, but the midnight moment on the street, eating, sniffling, and hearing that lone cry mixed with the mist, has become a memory forever. 13. Corn Dodgers, the fried corn cakes of the Depression. If tamales were the warmth of midnight, then in the Depression years of the 1930s, another food became the belly filler for millions of poor Americans. Corn Dodgers, little golden fried cornmeal cakes, cheap, compact, and sturdy. Corn Dodgers were usually rolled into balls or shaped into patties, dropped into hot fat until the crust crisped, while the inside stayed soft and nutty. Vendors wrapped them in old newspaper and handed them off quickly. Migrant workers, the unemployed, street sellers, anyone could hold one in hand and eat on the go. Just a few cents bought a meal, enough strength to keep going through a hard day. The image of the 1930s was familiar. Street corners smoky with frying oil, kids clutching warm paper bags, a man eating against the factory wall, biting into the crunchy edge of a corn dodger and swallowing with the lump of hard times. Not fancy, not luxurious, but carrying resilience, like the spirit of Americans pushing through the Depression. As living standards rose, factory bread and packaged snacks flooded the market, and corn dodgers vanished from the streets. Today, they appear only in bits of folklore and old newspaper photos, a reminder that once a simple fried corn cake could keep human determination alive. 12. Fish fry, the Friday night sizzle. If you lived in 1929, the hiss of frying oil outside a church or Union Hall on Friday night was a familiar sound. Huge cast iron skillets smoked as fish, clams, and oysters dipped in cornmeal batter hit the bubbling fat, turning golden and crisp. Wrapped quickly in wax paper, the hot meal cost only a few cents. A worker carried the bag home, inhaling the salty brine, feeling as if the week's struggles melted away in that simple meal. A fish fry wasn't just food. It was a Friday ritual for entire working communities. By the late 1950s, outdoor fish fry stands disappeared under health codes and fixed restaurants. Today, fish fries live on in church gatherings, but the memory of standing outside, hearing the oil sizzle, holding a hot paper bag under dim neon, belongs only to the past. 11. Roasted peanuts, a nickel bag by the station. Unlike today's dry packaged peanuts, coal-roasted peanuts on the street in the 1940s were something else entirely. The nuts turned slowly in a coal-fired roaster, shells darkening and cracking to reveal white seams, sending out a rich, smoky aroma that everyone on the street recognized instantly. A warm brown paper bag, fresh from the roaster, heated your hands and filled your nose. That was the smell of winter in the American North. In 1947, at New York's Grand Central Station, the call of hot roasted peanuts rang out between train whistles, pulling travelers toward the cart. The vendor scooped the golden nuts, the clatter against metal sounding like the beat of the city. A bag cost only 5 cents, enough to fill the stomach and thaw frozen fingers. By the 1960s, packaged snacks, vending machines, and bans on coal fires pushed peanut carts out of existence. Peanuts remain, but without the smoky shells, Without the moment of waiting for a train with a hot bag clutched tight, the heartbeat of the city faded away. 10. Fried hand pies. The country market. Treat. Imagine holding a wax paper bag dusted with powdered sugar, so hot that the steam fogged your car window. That was America's fried hand pies of the 1940s to 60s. From farm markets and roadside gas stations to county fairs, these hand pies were the grab-and-go breakfast of a generation. Thin pastry folded over sweet fruit filling, peaches or apples simmered with sugar and cinnamon. Dropped in hot oil, the crust puffed golden and crisp, while the inside bubbled into sticky syrup, bursting with each bite. A pie cost just a few cents, sweet enough for kids, filling enough for adults rushing to work. People still tell the story of 1950s children waiting eagerly for their mothers to come back from the market, a hot pie pressed into their hands, powdered sugar smeared on their shirts. But as industrial bakeries expanded and frying safety became a concern, the old hand pie stands disappeared. Today, you can buy hand pies in supermarkets, but they're only cold, packaged versions, missing that feeling of clutching a hot bag, steam fogging your windshield on a crisp autumn morning. 9. Loaded baked potato, a fairground tower. If any food captured the flavor of American county fairs in the 1950s to 70s, it was the giant foil-wrapped baked potato, blazing hot in your hand. If any food captured the flavor of American county fairs in the 1950s to 70s, it was the giant foil-wrapped baked potato, blazing hot in your hand. At state and county fairs, the potato stands were always packed. Huge spuds roasted over coal ovens, split open to release clouds of steam. Vendors spread butter, sprinkled salt, spooned on sour cream, bacon bits, and melted cheddar. Some stacked toppings sky high, turning a single potato into a feast. People waited in line, hugging their potatoes like hand warmers in the autumn chill. Every bite blended butter, tangy cream, salty bacon, and melted cheese with the fluffy flesh of the potato. Loaded potatoes still appear at fairs today, but bright electric ovens, pre-packaged toppings, and lifeless counters have replaced the old coal pits and paper wraps. Americans still eat them, but they miss the long waits under dim neon, holding a steaming potato that could warm an entire evening. 8. Snow cone, the tongue-stained purple. Who remembers rushing to a shaved ice cart in the sweltering summer heat of the 1930s, where rows of glass syrup bottles shone like a rainbow? The vendor cranked the handle, shaving ice into soft snow, scooped it into a paper cup, and poured syrup, made by hand. Each child clamored to pick their flavor: bright red strawberry, sharp green lime, or deep purple grape. For just one coin, a tiny hand clutched a cold cup, sipping syrup-soaked ice until their tongue turned bright colors, their shirt streaked with stains, and their face glowed with joy. The snow cone wasn't just a treat. It was the thrill of choice, the joy of deciding your own color of summer. But with industrial machines and standardized plastic bottles of syrup, the hand-shaved art faded away. Today's snow cones still appear at fairs, but without the magic of watching ice fall soft as snow under a vendor's hand, without the pride of sticking out a purple tongue for friends to see. 7. Steamed cheeseburger, missed, rising from the cart in Meriden, Connecticut. In the late 1920s, burgers looked different. Not grilled, not charred, but steamed in little steel trays set over boiling water. Beef patties cooked in steam, turning tender and juicy. Right beside them, blocks of cheddar were steamed too, melting into velvet sauce poured over the meat. Take a bite, and there was no sizzling crust, only moist, smoky beef, wow, fused with cloud-like melted cheese. A simple, unique meal that kept people fed in hard years. But after World War II, the steam cart model disappeared. Today, steamed cheeseburgers survive at places like Ted's, but indoors under bright lights. The memory of mist rising from steel boxes on street corners lives only in the stories of the old. 6. Coney dog, the immigrant's lifeline. In the early 20th century, through long factory shifts in Detroit or Flint, one cheap and filling food kept immigrant workers alive: the Coney dog. Not just any hot dog, the Coney carried its own mark: a smoked sausage in a soft bun, topped with a thick, spiced meat sauce, yellow mustard, and chopped onions. Each city had its own version: Detroit hearty and rich, Flint sharper and saltier, each a reflection of immigrant identity through food. A few cents bought a meal workers could eat standing. The smell of chili sauce mixing with sweat and machine oil, the flavor of labor itself. Today, Coney dogs still exist in restaurant chains, but the immigrant soul is gone. The street cries, the crowd of workers shoulder to shoulder at the corner. All have faded, leaving only a standard menu item, stripped of the life that made it special. 5. Soft pretzel, the morning crack in cold air. After the peanut vendor's calls, after the pickle barrel brine, American streets in the 1940s to 60s carried another sound: the crack of a fresh, soft pretzel splitting in two. In Philadelphia and New York, on chilly mornings, crowds gathered at pushcarts, taking brown paper bags of warm pretzels sprinkled with coarse salt. Break one open, and steam puffed into your face. Chewy inside, browned crust, perfect, with a dab of yellow mustard. A few cents bought the morning's start. For school kids, factory workers, or truckers grabbing breakfast on the corner. But when factory ovens and pre-sold pretzels took over, the little hand-twisted cold carts disappeared. Today pretzels are everywhere, but missing is the memory of standing on cold sidewalks, clutching a hot bag, the crack of bread starting the day. 4. Churros and candy apples, sweet fares. If pretzels were the warmth of morning streets, then fares of the 1930s to 60s were sugar and spice. Kids clutched churros fresh from the fryer, long and crisp, rolled in cinnamon sugar that stuck to their fingers. Beside them were glossy red candy apples, so sweet one bite glued their mouths shut. In another corner, kettle corn popped in giant pans, the sweet and salty smell drifting through the fairgrounds. The thrill was in the show: the old man rolling churros and sugar, the vendor pulling sticky apples, the cheers when corn burst from the kettle. Not just food, it was theater, the fair itself alive with flavor and color. Today, churros, candy apples, and kettle corn still exist, but without the coal fires, without the crowds leaning in to watch, without kids shrieking with sugar-sticky hands, the magic has faded. 3. Cruller, the twisted street. Donut crullers were the street donuts of New York and New England. Golden hand twists that fueled countless mornings in the early 20th century. On winter mornings of the 1920s, the hiss of frying oil and the sweet smell of dough called people to stop. Vendors lifted crullers from cast iron pans into paper bags, sugar sprinkling onto frozen sidewalks. Workers, students, and merchants alike. For just a few cents, they held a treat crisp outside, soft inside, paired with hot black coffee. But as donut chains industrialized, the hand-twisted street cruller disappeared. Today you may still find them in bakeries, but not the moment of breaking one open in the morning fog, steam and sweetness waking the day. 2. Hoe cake and Johnny cake, cornbread of survival. Next came hoe cakes and Johnny cakes, survival food of the poor, when just a few cents and a little cornmeal could fill hungry stomachs. No neon signs, no storefronts, just a cast iron skillet over coals at a southern market in the 1930s. An old woman spread cornmeal, mixed with lard and salt across the pan, flipping it until the edges charred golden, filling the air with roasted corn. Passers-by grabbed cakes wrapped in old newspaper, crunching dry edges and rustic sweetness to keep hunger away. Just a few cents fed farmers and laborers alike. Not fancy, but resilient, like America itself pushing through crisis. As life improved, factory bread filled stores, and hoe cakes and Johnny cakes vanished from sidewalks. Today they survive in folk cookbooks and heritage fairs, a bittersweet memory of simple food that once saved communities. 1. Clam chowder. Cart, harbor soup of the night. At New England docks in the early 20th century, when sea winds whipped faces raw, people sought chowder carts like fire in the dark. Pots of steaming chowder made with fresh clams, potatoes, onions, and milk, always served with little bags of oyster crackers. Diners dropped handfuls in, listened to the cheerful crackle, then slurped to fight the cold. A bowl cost just 5 cents, feeding sailors, dock workers, and late-night travelers, all gathered around, steam mixing with waves and ship whistles. But sanitation codes and the rise of restaurants cleared carts from the docks. Today, clam chowder is a sit-down dish, far from its street roots. So we've reached the end of our journey through 25 street foods that once defined America's heartbeat, from the spicy pepper pot of Philadelphia's corners to the steaming chowder pots of New England harbors. Each dish was more than a way to fill a stomach. It was a piece of memory, community warmth, the soul of a city in its time. And when those foods vanished, what people missed wasn't just the taste. It was a part of life, childhood, and history that left with them. Among these 25, which flavor do you miss most, or wish you could try again? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe so we can keep unlocking the doors of memory, bringing back the flavors that time has taken from everyday life.